Okay, we'll call the June 1st Planning Commission meeting to order. It's approximately 7:01 p.m. I'm the chair of the Narberth Planning Commission, Adam Crom, and I'll just take a quick roll. Ralph, I believe, is absent. Jennifer?
Here.
Todd?
Here.
Heidi? Is not here. Aaron?
Here.
Brian?
Here.
And then, is there anybody on the phone?
I don't see anyone from planning commission.
All right, so those are the members in attendance.
I think David said he wasn't able to.
Yeah. So I'll run through the agenda really quickly. Item 1 is announcements and updates. Item 2 is approval of the minutes from May. Item 3 is discussion. We'll be discussing a request to consider how to add active recreation to the land use permitted in downtown. We have a tentative sketch plan on the agenda for 714 Montgomery Avenue, which is the Price House. However, the applicant has withdrawn that submission for this month because the applicant received zoning officer's report and borough engineer's report, and there were a number of issues with their proposal, and so they would like to pull it back and resubmit it after addressing the items raised by the zoning officer. We also had Heidi Boyce join us in the room. Item 4 is public comment, and then we will adjourn. So we will only have one topic for discussion on the agenda for tonight. So for updates, I'd like to switch the order and do the Montgomery County Planning Commission staff update first.
All right. Let's see what we've been up to. So we've submitted the zoning recodification draft to council for review. There might be some slight discussion around the zoning districts and presenting them slightly differently. I presented 2 different options, one, the original version, and then I converted everything to tables, to use tables. So there might be some discussion around that, but that's been taking up some time. Additionally, did present or co-present with Jennifer at the last council meeting about some of the things that we've been doing here, mainly around 5B and 4A, just giving them an update. Some of the research, much of the research that Adam Crom has done, we presented. And so that went over pretty well. Other than that, that's all I have.
Any questions? Okay. So for the chair's update, this past month, we had a number of the members of the commission attend various meetings in the borough. Our secretary, Jennifer Anacone, went to the council's finance committee meeting and also the general work session. And Todd Bressie went to a zoning hearing board meeting. And so I'd like to ask the members to report out on those meetings, please.
I'll start. So I went to the finance committee meeting 2 Tuesdays ago in order to be there for any questions associated with the financing, associated with the 5B and 4A conversation. A lot of the questions were specific to sort of income for council or for the borough, like if we were to build an apartment building versus a mixed use versus townhomes or single family, what does the income look like for the borough as generated per property? To which I said, as a commission, we have not been studying it that detailed. We have members of the planning commission with background who, we can have that type of conversation and report back. But in general, the research that we had seen on the high level is that higher density properties have a higher valuation. So they bring in more property taxes. If they're mixed use, then you also get the business taxes. And then you also have more incomes providing income taxes in a single parcel than you would with a lesser density use. So even if the income level of a person in a townhome or a single family home is higher than the average income of a person living in an apartment building, the density ratio offsets that and it still generates more income for the borough than a less dense property. They also had questions regarding pro forma calculations and whether or not there's sort of a sweet spot in regards to number of units, density ratios, or building heights that are make or break for a development, which is not really a straightforward answer. And so I asked if they have more specific questions to bring them to council for us to review further, but that holistically there are a lot of ratios, like conversations and factors that play into whether or not each deal pencils. And so we're trying to look at multiple properties in each of those districts that we've talked about to date in order to try to find a solution that works more than once. And then at the council meeting that Thursday, it was, there were a lot of questions. I think we presented for an hour to an hour and a half.
Yes.
And we went through topics related to specific calculations within the zoning code for like calculating building height and density calculations. We also reviewed just the big picture of all the research and the conversations that we've been having. And we reiterated that as a planning commission, we have been reviewing these two districts for over a year at this point, and we have not been able to proceed into further jurisdiction or into other districts like the threes because we're still coming back to these components. And so there were a lot of questions about the missing middle, townhomes, cottages, to which we really felt that the next zoning districts are the ones that can target that the most, but that we are addressing it in our recommendations for 4A, and that we are recommending that district should be allowed to develop row home, townhome style properties as well as the cottages. But that addressing that missing middle for purchase specifically needs to come from a more residential and less, and not in the districts that the goal is density of people. There's a lot of questions, I think, still outstanding, and I asked if they could clarify and if there were any further research that they wanted to send that back to planning commission so we have more direction. But at the moment, the directive has been for those two districts looking at density and best use of sites in the district list.
So just 5A and 5B, like you said,
5B and 4A.
and 4A.
Those are the only two that we reviewed at council. We've only submitted recommendations for 5B and 4A. We have not submitted any recommendations for 5A, and we have not reviewed any further of the forest. So some of the questions are sort of hard to address, like missing middle, if we're not looking beyond just two zoning districts.
Any other questions for Jennifer? So I think they've asked you to come back again, so,
Yeah.
all right.
I would guess that it comes with that.
Those meetings are held during the day. So the other commissioner went to a different meeting. Todd, he went to the zoning hearing board, which the zoning hearing board is a judicial function that can grant or not grant relief from zoning for someone who wants to build something. So.
Correct. The zoning hearing board adjudicates special exceptions, which are in the zoning code, and then requests for variances. So it's both those things. Yes, so I went to the zoning hearing board last Thursday night, and there were two cases in front of the zoning hearing board. Emily, would you mind? Could I share? I could show people the actual pages from the document.
Sure.
Should be easier. One involved additions to a single family house in Green B district, and the other involved creation of a new house on a lot which already had a structure in the 3A district. And I think the reason for being interested in this is it helps us understand how people are really grappling with the code and their like day-to-day projects they have to do. And it helps us understand the reality of things and where there may be things in the code that are tripping people up or really aren't well defined, or in any case, it's a good way to kind of think about when we think about zoning changes, it gives us a little insight to play out when people are trying to build things in Dartmouth. So the first case was 200 Barry Road, which is off Essex Avenue next to the Presbyterian Church, more or less. And it's a pretty simple case. The applicants, you can see there's a kind of dark line here. They wanted to build an addition to their house, which encroached into the setbacks. You can see existing dwelling and proposed addition. And the proposed addition would encroach into the side yard by 2 feet, so it's 5 feet instead of 7 feet, and it would encroach 3.5 feet into the rear yard. It would be 11.5 feet setback rather than 15 feet setback. The reason for the change or for the request was that the owner wanted to build, it is an owner-occupied house. They wanted to expand the space on the ground floor to make the house more amenable to aging in place, so they didn't have to go up and downstairs as much to use the bathroom, and so forth. The kitchen is also being expanded. A mudroom is being added. There was one adjacent resident who came and testified in favor of the application. The zoning hearing board didn't really ask many fact-finding questions like, did you explore other approaches, or why do you have to have a mudroom if you require variance? None of those sorts of things. And basically determined that the request was de minimis request, and so it was granted. I think the thing that's important is that variances are supposed to be difficult to get. You're only supposed to get a variance if you are encountering a situation which you did not create. Like, for example, there's a tree you want to save in your yard, so you have to build in a different direction. Or there's a rock outcropping, or topography, or your lot's not perfectly a rectangle. Those are the reasons we have variances. And so I thought it was kind of interesting that the zoning hearing board didn't really pursue that line of question. I mean, I think we all want people to be able to add to their houses. It's exactly what we hope for. So it's just something to keep in mind that sometimes on our tight lots, people don't have that room. And if we can think of ways to address that in our code, that would come in. The second case was a little more interesting and complicated. It was for a property on Wynwood Avenue, North Wynwood Avenue. Just a few, it's between Foxhall Lane and Sabine Avenue. It's behind the houses. So if you look at this here, those houses on the bottom, that's Foxhall Lane. And then this is the subject property. And so the way this property works is this is a structure that exists. I don't know for sure how old it is, but it might be 20 years old. And it is a garage and a dwelling. I guess the dwelling is above the garage and maybe behind the garage. They didn't really explain that part clearly. The other area, there had been a house here and it burned down some time ago. And the applicant wanted to rebuild on the site of the foundation of the remains of the old property, and also expand beyond that original foundation. One of the very interesting quirks about this property is when we passed the historic district ordinance, the house or at least the foundation, was in the historic district and was a contributing resource. But the line kind of went diagonally through the property. And so the carriage house, which is what they call it, was not a historic resource. And it was probably built too recently to be a historic resource in any case. So it wasn't a contributing resource. So apparently, although I asked Adam and he said he couldn't remember, recently the owner petitioned to the harm and had the foundations declassified as a contributing resource. This will come into play later, this little bit. So the applicant wanted, I think the applicant lives next door now, but wants to move into this property and stay there. You know, they're elderly persons, they want to stay there, you know. And the architecture, I must say, is a beautifully designed house, mission style house that they want to build there. But they needed, I think, 5 variances and 1 special exception. The variances they need came into 3 categories. Their strategy for approaching this site was to consider the new house that they're going to build the primary building, right? And then to consider the existing building an accessory building. And moreover, to consider it an accessory dwelling unit since it's habitable. And so they would have 2 buildings in a lot, which is allowed if one is a primary building, one is an accessory building. So in order to classify the carriage house as an accessory building, though, it was too big to be an accessory dwelling unit. Our rules for an accessory dwelling unit say 600 square feet floor plate and 804 square feet overall area. And this is like 1,000 or 1,200 square feet altogether. So it was too big to be an accessory dwelling unit. And so they didn't provide an analysis of whether it would be considered non-conforming, but they just decided to seek a variance, like grandfathered in because it's not. So they decided to seek a variance to those rules. So this could be considered a accessory dwelling unit, even though it didn't meet the dimensional metrics. It's also too high. I think 16 feet is the height of an accessory dwelling unit. And I think this is 22 feet. So height, floor plate, floor area. So that was one set of variances. Second set of variances they needed for the new house. They needed one because the math of the facade size didn't quite work. The facade width, it was off by about 1 foot or half a foot or something like that. Because of the way our facade rules work, the minimum and maximum are related to the overall size of the lot. I can't review the math with you, but suffice to say they had a very narrow window to land in and they couldn't, so they sought a variance for the front facade. And they argued, you can't see the facade from the street, so it doesn't matter. They needed a variance. They wanted to build the frontage on, I think, on the side here where the porch used to be. So they needed a variance in terms of frontage dimensions. And they also needed a special exception to put parking over here. You can see the driveways going. We have a special exception essentially that says you can put in this district and others, you can have parking in the second lot layer entered from the side of your house, but by special exception. The thing about this special exception is there's no criteria. You just have to ask for a special exception. There's no evaluating factors. There's no mitigating factors. You just have to ask for it. And I think it's a special exception. We've always thought we might just reevaluate, what's the purpose. So they had to ask for that special exception because it's in the code. So they had to ask for the accessory dwelling unit, the facade, the porch, special exception for the parking, and they needed one more variance. And the last variance was these 2 buildings together exceed the building coverage allowed on the lot by like 100 feet or something like that. It's just too big. And as with the previous application, they gave no explanation as to why. Why is it essential that this needs to be bigger than the zoning allows? Could this work without it? They gave no evidence, and the zoning hearing board did not ask them. for that. I will say, if you go back and read the transcript, you will see as an individual citizen, I testified and I said, this is the kind of project we love to see. We love the architecture. We love people doing these things, but we have rules about how big buildings can be for a reason. And they haven't given any evidence as to why they need it bigger. So I would support the project, but not that variance. Zoning hearing board split their vote. The entire zoning hearing board approved all the variances and the special exception, except the one for the building coverage. And in terms of the building coverage, 2 zoning hearing board members voted to support it and 1 voted against it on the grounds that there was no evidence provided as to why. In a variance, you have to, you can only be given the least possible relief. And there's no evidence provided as to why the relief was needed or whether this was the least possible relief. So it was approved. One thing I'd like to say about this is there are potentially 2 other ways they could have done this. They could have done it through a subdivision process. The subdivision rules are quirky. It could have been considered a flag lot had they done it, but council is allowed to waive certain considerations, and the flag lot rules are written in a very quirky way that you could have even potentially argued that it wasn't a flag lot. So they could have pursued a subdivision, and they could have had 2 buildings in the lot, and they might have still needed a variance for parking, for the porch, and maybe a special exception to the parking, and they need a cross-access agreement. But they wouldn't have needed variances for the accessory dwelling. The other path they could have taken had the ruins, and I'm not sure, there was no actual evidence provided that it was delisted. They just said it was, but there was no letter presented that said it was delisted. Had this been a historic resource, they could have used the part of our code that says you can have 2 buildings, principal buildings on a lot. And that's exactly why we wrote that part of the code. So they could have had 2 houses on the property. And again, the only variances they would have needed was potentially for the, I'm not sure if they would have even needed one for the facade at that point, because the 2 facades begin to interact in the calculations. So they might have only needed to have a variance for the porch and a special exception for the parking. They didn't choose that route because by removing their property from the contributing resource list, they no longer had that available. What that suggests is we might one day consider whether that rule could apply to more properties than just ones with contributing resources. So anyway, sorry to get wonky, but I think it's interesting to see these cases and see what people are trying to do and how the kind of code problems they run into, the paths they can take, and what the tenor of the zoning hearing board is today. That's my report.
Any questions for Todd?
Actually curious on the Berry house, person that testified for it, did that happen to be the neighbor that they were encroaching?
Well, I think the answer is, let me see. I think the answer is yes. The reason being, though, to the rear of that lot is, to the rear of that lot is the Presbyterian Church, which is a condo, and the person who testified lives in the condo. So it's not like it's an individual. So yes.
Okay, thank you. That sure we can.
I think that was the case. I don't know. Maybe it's-
Do any other commissioners have any updates to share? Go on to agenda item number 2, which is the approval of the May minutes that were circulated, I think, on Friday. Does anyone have any revisions or corrections for the May minutes? I'd like to make a motion to adopt the May minutes.
Motion.
Second.
Right, it's been motioned and seconded to approve the May 2026 meeting minutes. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so they are adopted by unanimous approval. Thank you, Emily, for working on this. Item number 3 is the topics of discussion, which is it's the proposal to allow active uses for gyms in the downtown zoning. I know that a couple of commissioners have spent their time analyzing this issue and have come ready to offer their perspective to the full commission for consideration. I think that was Jennifer and Todd. It's not here.
How light to Europe. Do you mind if I start, Jennifer?
Sure.
Okay. So we did meet and discuss this with the idea of coming back to you with recommendations. But before we did that, Adam Chance wrote up a little analysis with his own thoughts about this. And so what I'd like to do is pass them out and then ask if they can be attached to minutes. Are any of you here because of this issue about gyms in downtown? Okay, because if you were, I was going to give you a copy of this. Because I know the gym owner came last month to talk to us, but I don't remember. Okay. All right,
I have a
so
digital, so
what's that?
I have a
Okay. You pass those around. This will be attached to the minutes. Too. And then here's, Mark, you pass that around.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
They would apply an alternate for that,
I'll take your
crosswalks,
Well, we allow them on the cross streets now on the ground floor.
right?
It's really just the ground floor having for that.
It's also just the definition.
Yeah.
The time. And then
Sure, that's right. And that would be a borough wide. So what I'll do is let Adam go through it all and then I'll try to characterize what Rob and Jennifer and I came up with. And then I have some further thoughts.
Right. So, yeah, last month we had kind of talked a little bit about fitness uses. We had the presentation from the gentleman that I guess has a potential fitness use for Haverford Avenue. But I just kind of took a look at what some other communities are doing, as well as, just based on the discussion last time around different types of standards, what, I thought was appropriate, what I would recommend, and why. So we talked about distance and performance standards. So currently, let's talk about currently how gyms or fitness uses are treated. So they're treated as personal care in the code. So that means they're prohibited on ground floors in Haverford Avenue.
So what does personal care mean?
So personal care.
Personal care. So a gym falls under the category of personal care, and that is a use currently. It is an establishment which offers specialized, non-medically related services generally related to personal needs where the customer area is not separated from the service area. Personal care services include barbershops, beauty shops, hair salons, waxing, hair removal services, nail salons, laundromats, and similar establishments. These businesses may or may not offer the sales of goods in conjunction with personal care services, and they are currently allowed in the 5A district, but not on the ground floor of Haverford Avenue. See where else they're allowed. by right.
Are there any spacing requirements for personal?
Yeah, there are spacing requirements,
For
350 feet.
Is it for all personal care or just?
So it,
They're allowed by right in the 5A and 5B.
yeah, they're allowed by right in 5A, 5B.
But not on the ground floor have for that.
Yeah, not on the ground floor, not Haverford Avenue. The spacing requirement is 350 feet from the entryway of any building of the same type of personal care use.
I thought we had worded it as same type of personal care, so that it was like hair salon, and not hair salon.
Same type of personal care use, yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah, so, you can see that fitness doesn't really fit in with those other uses. It's just the way that the zoning officer has been, since they're undefined, treating them. So we thought, okay, so what kind of distance or performance standard should there be for a fitness use?
So first, start with the definition.
I'm getting.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, we had talked last time about having different types of fitness uses, maybe like a smaller type of fitness use on Haverford Ave, in the downtown district, where there are smaller building footprints, lots, versus what we would permit on Montgomery Avenue. So I had kind of broken it down as like a fitness studio would be, so that which is permitted in both places, but Haverford Ave as well. Fitness studio, a use that provides a health and exercise facility to patrons or members, and may incorporate activities such as classes, including but not limited to strength training, yoga, Pilates, dance, and or martial arts. I had also included a provision, just such facility may also include a snack bar and or retail sales of related health or fitness items. And the reason I had kind of like those different, first of all, I looked at what's currently in the borough for kind of fitness uses, and that encompasses, yoga, Pilates, dance, and then also what's popular in other places. So martial arts would also be included within that. The idea behind also allowing for snack bars to, activate the frontage, activate street. I didn't have it as a requirement, but I just had it as an option. And then indoor recreation would be kind of a bigger type of gym, kind of, hopefully like that would be more of like a chain gym for Montgomery Avenue. So I define that as a use that provides commercial indoor space for health and exercise facilities and or sports, including but not limited to racket sports and swimming. Such facility may also provide other regular organized or franchised events, snack bar, restaurant, and retail sales of related sports, health or fitness items. And with that definition, I also wanted to, bear in mind that on Montgomery Avenue, there's a tennis facility, so that would constitute that. And there are some kind of like other different types of gyms there. So that would be a larger type of gym. So those were my proposed definitions for discussion. In terms of location, we talked about that. Fitness studios would be kind of like the smaller use, permitted in both 5A and 5B, versus indoor recreation only allowed in 5B. Next, I wanted to consider the distance performance standard that personal care has and some other uses have downtown. And I just took a look, see on this, it's kind of small because this was sent via email, but it's going to be very hard to see. But basically I measured out, what 350 feet actually is. And so 350 feet, it's really that south side of Haverford Avenue, from the corner of North Narberth all the way to Station Circle. So that's basically exactly 350 feet for that current performance standard for personal care. It's also the north-south blocks, so Forest Avenue from Windsor to Haverford, North Narberth from Windsor to Haverford, North Essex from Windsor to Haverford. So that's 350 feet. So it's like an entire lengthy block within the downtown. And I thought that that was probably, if we're going to consider a distance regulation for fitness uses, I thought that was a little bit too onerous. So I measured out kind of what 250 feet would be, 150 feet would be, and 250 feet, to give you an idea, it's kind of like a smaller block, between, so east-west on Haverford Avenue, between Forest and North Narberth, or between Forest and North Essex, that's about 250 feet. And that seemed okay and appropriate. I was okay with not having a distance standard, so I looked at other regulations, other codes, and there's really not a lot that people are doing with distance standards for gyms. I feel like fitness uses have become more and more popular in this day and age, and so I don't think people are regulating them as heavily. And they, in my mind, they've started to not just be kind of like, they started to be more activating is what I'm saying. It's like, I think a lot of people are going, there are classes and things of that nature. And while hours are something to consider, and I'll get to that in a moment, I think, it provides some people on the street at, early morning, but it could be also in the evening. So that's something to consider. Then I took a look at what's currently in the borough. How are the current regulations for personal care working? And it was pretty interesting. There was basically, a couple of fitness uses per block, not on Haverford Ave, but per, on North Essex, on Forest, and North Narberth. So there's a DEA, there's a strength training gym on Essex. There's a Pilates studio on Essex as well. Yoga studio, 2 yoga studios actually on Forest. Another yoga establishment on North Narberth, and then on South Narberth there's a yoga studio. So you're seeing kind of a pattern. Yoga's popular in Narberth, but so they actually seemed relatively spread out. So it was interesting, and it seemed, it seemed like the market was working, and also the regulation was working, but maybe not for Haverford Avenue. So next, I wanted to take a look at noise, because noise is where you do see a performance standard that's common. Lower Merion has one for noise as well. So I took a look, and theirs is pretty standard. Basically, and Narberth also currently does have a performance standard for noise for manufacturing uses. So it's not current, it's strictly for manufacturing uses in Narberth currently. But in other places they have the noise standard, and they basically have a maximum sound pressure level between 7:30 a.m. and 9 p.m. And then a lower level between 9 p.m. and 7:30 a.m. So I provided some recommendations around that. And basically, that's basically the noise level at the lot line, how that's regulated. And, they could be relaxed slightly for non-residential uses, but at the same time, it's a mixed-use district. It's not necessary. There definitely should be a noise regulation. So that performance standard, I'm definitely supportive of and have proposed language for. In terms of hours of operation, what other places are doing, they're really, where they put a performance standard down is, you cannot operate overnight, or like between the hours of like either 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. and 6 or 7 in the morning. So that's what I found was more appropriate. I did look at the hours of operation of current fitness uses here, and 5 out of the 7 fitness uses are actually, they have hours throughout the day, whereas 2 kind of were just like early morning and evening. So it's something to consider. I'm not necessarily against having a performance standard for hours of operations requiring them to be open, 8 to 5 or what have you, but it's not something that's too common. And I also see I see people on the street, people being allowed on the street at different hours. I don't see necessarily that is such a problem. But I do recognize that Haverford is kind of like the main street, and you want it to be as active as possible. So my recommendation was probably not to put a perfect performance standard, for like 8 or 9 to 5, but you could put one, requiring that they close at a certain hour and open at a certain hour. And then, yeah, those were basically, that was just like a quick analysis of what's happening, what I see in Narberth and what's happening elsewhere. And so I just provided that as background information to the committee that was organized for this purpose.
Quick notice, I should say. Thank you.
Yes, on quick notice.
So we all had this information, Jennifer and Ralph and I, and considered it and digested it. And I think it's important to start by saying the reason we're talking about this is because one of the most important characteristics of Narberth's zoning code has to do with how Haverford Avenue is treated. And that is that, it's been regarded for a long time as a place that is a retail street, retail restaurants, and we've tried to discourage or prevent the opening of businesses that might create lulls in the streetscape, like office frontages and so forth. So those that you see were there before those rules were implemented, so that the street would be as lively and active as possible. And so it is the part of the borough where you have the most complex rules. Like, you can put offices upstairs, but you can't put your offices on the ground floor. You can put them on Forest Avenue, you can put them on Essex Avenue, around the corner. It's just not on the ground floor of Haverford. So that's been a kind of a principle. That's not to say it's good to reevaluate that from time to time, particularly now, since on the one hand, retail life is changing, but apparently restaurant life is booming, including in Narberth, so maybe not such a bad idea. But in any case, that's sort of the kind of principle that is making us kind of work so hard to figure this out. And so personal care, things like gyms and so forth, typically have not been allowed on Narberth, Haverford Avenue, just on the side streets. So we looked at these rules, and I think I'm going to try to differentiate the group thinking what my recommendations are, but ultimately what I'm going to say sort of reflects what I think, and then Jennifer can say like where she feels, this should be heading. But we thought the definitions were generally okay, the ones that Adam presented. However, myself, I question the language of snack bar. I think it's a little vague, and maybe language like prepared food and beverages or some such language might be more clear. And also, while the definition that a fitness studio may include food, beverage, and retail sales is generally, a good approach. I think on Haverford Avenue, if we were to allow these on the ground floor, we want to require them to have food, beverage, and or retail sales. And we'll talk more about that in a second. In terms of mapping these two uses, the recommendations Adam brought forward, we thought made sense, except that, and when I say Haverford, I also mean North Narberth Avenue. The ground floor use must include retail or food or beverage uses on the ground floor. We don't quite know what the right distance for that is, but if you can imagine, if you want to have like an exercise facility or something, but in the front you wanted to have a juice bar or something like that was open to anybody in the public, or if you wanted to sell gear or training equipment or anything, or even it could be a different business, could open up a little pop-up in there, but the point being that the front needs to be retail. And then behind it, what's that?
We just weren't sure the
Yeah, we're not sure the depth, but behind it, you could then have that use. And, it reminds me when we talked about microbreweries, which are classified as industry or manufacturing, and so they're not allowed on the ground floor. But the same rule would apply if a microbrewery went open and they had like a beverage store in the front or a little restaurant in the front or something that could possibly work, because then you have that activity we want, but you have the other business which helps provide some economic viability in the space as well. So we thought that was an important rule, that there must be retail, food or beverages on the ground floor. We thought that the noise standard, I don't know if we discussed, but I think we discussed the noise standards as proposed by MCPC makes sense. Other performance standards, again, food, beverage, and retail sales at the front of the building. Those uses should be accessible to all customers, not just customers or members of the studio. Anyone should be able to go and access that use. We could not determine what death standards would be right. And I don't know if we talked about this or not, but I feel that there should be some standards of operation during the day. I mean, the thing about some of these studios is they may operate in the morning and then be closed in the day and operate in the evening because, you know, they're small businesses. It's an individual entrepreneur. They come when they have customers. They close when they don't. I think we need on Haverford Avenue businesses that have a regularized presence. You know, most of the businesses are open between 11 and 6 usually on the days they're open. A lot are closed on Monday, as I found out when I tried to get a refill shift today. I couldn't do it. But in any case, there should be requirements that there should be some daytime business hours at a minimum that kind of reflect the common business hours on the street, so that even though we have a gym or say more like a fitness, like a Pilates class thing, it's not open from 6 till 10 and then closes for the rest of the night. So location and distance, I don't think we talked about that, did we, Jennifer?
No.
But I'm kind of feeling like the rule we have right now is okay, 350 feet. If we were to reduce it, because we studied that a lot last time, that does actually, if things work right, allow for 1 per block, which means you could have 4 on Haverford Avenue. And goodness gracious, if we had 4 gyms on Haverford Avenue, we'd say, why do we have 4 gyms on Haverford Avenue? So I kind of feel like that's okay. That's the standard now, and I feel like no one's proven that it needs to be less than that. And then we didn't talk about dimensional requirements. But when we talked about the width,
We talked about
what
the
we
width,
talked was that the
and we
width
talked
was important,
Depth.
but the depth doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The area doesn't matter, the depth doesn't matter, but the width matters, because in Haverford Avenue, we don't want, businesses that occupy huge swaths. We want lots of store experiences. So I came up with a thought that I would like to propose. So in our code now, the maximum width of a commercial building is 40 feet. The maximum width of a mixed-use building is 40 feet. So if we were to just build a commercial building or build a mixed-use building, you can make it 40 feet, or you can make it 65 feet, and you can put a store in it. So that should be the rule. If you're in a commercial building, the maximum width of the use should be 40 feet. If you're in a mixed-use building, the maximum width of the use should be 65 feet, because that's what we would allow if you were building a new building. The catch there is the properties there now are non-conforming. So we have a commercial building, which is 150 feet long. So that's why this rule would apply to the use and not the building. So you could have a commercial building non-conforming that's 150 feet long, but you could still only put a 40-foot use in there. And that's a way to get that pace of businesses that we want to have. Or if you're in a mixed-use building, you could have 65-foot wide, which I think on Haverford Avenue is super generous. Nothing is 65 feet on Haverford. So that's my proposal for the dimensions, and we might even consider expanding that to other things. I don't know. And then everyone knows, who's been around, that I think that one of the most important factors in Haverford Avenue is the amount of doors. And so I also would propose the dimension that says any use over 40 feet should have an independent set of doors for every 20 feet of width that it is. So if we have a 65-foot wide use, you have to have three sets of doors. If you have a 40-foot, more than 40 feet, you have to have two sets of
So this
doors.
is-
Because those doors are what gives the street its liveliness. And that's, let me just make sure that's everything. That's everything.
Um, I have a question. So is this intended for businesses locating in an existing building?
Yep. That's why it's tied to the use. That's
Just one technical note. The liquor store building is gated.
right,
It's curved.
right.
Okay, that's one door.
Right.
It's great, but
So if you want to put a gym in there,
you wouldn't have to add more doors, right? It wouldn't.
probably, although I would argue that the liquor store building, because of the block it's in, might live under different rules, just because the block it's in.
Is it only from Essex or Forest to, or Station Circle then to Narberth Avenue, or is it Essex to?
No, just North Narberth Avenue and Haverford Avenue. North Narberth Avenue, because you have that same pace.
So I mean, the liquor store building's on Haverford Avenue though, right? So
Right.
why would it be not covered?
No, I said it would be covered, but I could see the argument for treating that block differently because it's not part of the continuous.
You can't put another, that's accessible.
Streets falling.
Well, it's also just in the pattern of things, it's not important for that building. That's actually a place where it's okay because of the way the blocks work to have just one thing. So that you can just say the rule applies to Haverford between Essex and Narberth and Station Circle, and therefore the liquor store. Which I think from all kinds of reasons makes sense. Because it will be empty soon, and so that could be it could be a natural opportunity to have a larger use. It's not going to mess up the main part of Haverford.
Any comments on what's been developed so far?
What's the reason that we need two definitions of fitness studio and indoor recreation?
We don't necessarily. It was just because a larger fitness use is kind of different. It encompasses more different types of activities. But you don't necessarily need two definitions.
It
It could be a little
it
confusing.
could get, because like if I wanted to put a smaller recreational use in the fitness studio space, I don't know, it could get slightly confusing.
I guess if we had one definition, then we would want if everyone is in agreement, we would want the retail food sale component that is desired on Haverford to not be included in the definition, and then that should be separated out based on the district, so that you're not mandating that, like, if you were to you would rebuild the tennis, like, you wouldn't have to put a restaurant there with it.
I think the reason for having it different is because they actually do reflect different scales and types of businesses, and it may be helpful down the road. I mean, if you have two definitions, you encompass everything that's in both those definitions. So like in the 5B district, since both would be allowed, you could do whatever. It would be in the 5A district, and that would be the point. It would allow us to fine tune things. Like, for example, you might say, well, gee, in the 4B district, that might be a great place for fitness. Like we have this rule in the 4B district where we let commercial uses at the corner of Iona and Woodbine, right? Why? A yoga studio might be great in that neighborhood, right? So that might be a good reason to have the definition separate so you can fine tune where you want those uses to go.
Yes.
You wouldn't want a basketball gym in that neighborhood, but if someone wants to, do Pilates classes in that.
Is there a reason that your definition for indoor recreation didn't include more like specifics, like examples for like indoor soccer, roller rink?
No, that it could.
I think to me,
was
like the two definitions
was a-
felt almost very similar.
They are a little
So
bit
I was
similar,
trying to
yeah.
figure out like
No, we
maybe it
could-
needs to be differentiated.
We
on
could
like,
differentiate it a
larger
little bit
scale.
more and include different sporting activities. Yeah, that would require a larger space.
Right.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's another thing.
But like
But
larger that tend to also be louder by nature. Not a rock gym, but like a larger.
Oh,
That's Abington's definition apparently. It's indoor facilities accommodating such sports as bowling, billiards, indoor soccer, ice roller rink.
Yeah, I saw those. I didn't know if that was something.
I mean,
if you
I
wanted to
don't think
promote those
that
types
that's
of uses, I think-
necessarily what would get built on one.
Yeah.
But
What's
Yeah.
more likely is that like, what is it, the Krinsky place might decide they want to do one of these things
right.
before that site gets really. Yeah, let's put a rock site. So this would give them a little more certainty.
The other thing I think is worth discussing is the food and beverage. I would prefer them to have food and beverage, but you're putting the responsibility of somebody who might own a fitness studio to now be able to be a chef and have a prepared food section.
It could be retail, so it could be like clothing or accessories. Like if you're doing a yoga studio, you could sell mats and
I think maybe allowing it just to be beverage.
No, I don't.
And
I
would
feel
that
like-
would that be satisfied with a cold case with water?
I think that's why we wanted to be able to define a depth. We just we're not really sure what that depth makes sense to be. Like, do we use the same 12 feet minimum that we talked about using in the 5B for commercial? Do we say recommendation of a minimum of 12 feet for that space? Does that provide sufficient? Is a 40 by 12 space?
I don't know. But I would also say that if someone wants to open a gym but doesn't feel comfortable with adding that, then maybe they should open their gym at Montgomery Avenue. I don't think we need to make Haverford Avenue available to everybody. I think we should be really, targeted about the kind of businesses we think will add to the environment there. One of the things I thought was like, if someone were looking for 8,000 feet to build a gym in Harvard, they can't find a spot on Haverford Avenue. Maybe that makes a deal happen for a new building in Essex Avenue. Like someone says, well, geez, I can get 8,000 feet leased out to a gym on the ground floor and put 6 apartments above, and I'm going to put a new building where the dentistry building is. So I kind of feel like I'm not too worried that there may be some gym owners who don't want to have a juice bar and therefore don't want to be on Haverford Avenue. There's other options.
Yeah, I think it just depends on how we define beverage, right? Because I agree with you, but I don't want to hinder businesses necessarily. And we also, I think, promote restaurants and other food eateries. So smoothie juice, sure, right? But prepared food, something like that, so maybe I don't know. It just that was sort of my gut reaction. I like it in theory, but I also don't want to hinder businesses to rapid grow places.
I had asked if we, cause the specific question had been for fitness, but I had said that we should consider changing the definition to be able to allow things like a microbrewery that wants to brew in the back and sell in the front, like, so it might be that we need to figure out like how we define that type of layout use in a space and then just define it so that it applies to fitness, it applies to bar, restaurant, and it could apply to like for manufacturing. So like, could that definition distribute out?
I think that's a good idea.
Because I do think that that type of use, like the microbrew or the micro distillery or someone that's like packaging and selling, would be interested in having a small bar space or shop space. Disagree that it's dissuading potentially some fitness owners, but I do think that there is a model already in place with a number of fitness companies, like small chains that, like, I mean, even a SoulCycle sells shoes and brand wear at the front. And would probably, their typical lobby layout would probably be deep enough to be considered.
Yeah, I think it just depends on how we define it.
Sure.
Right,
Yeah.
but
I do agree the packaged food does raise it, like, how many people are just gonna grab and go grab snacks,
right,
call
it's
it.
like a separate business.
Yeah.
But in theory,
Just spending.
yeah. What's-
Not a bad. People, it's work for everybody. Go to Notabat.
There's all kinds of permits required for food, so.
Yeah.
It's
Well, it's
really
true.
a business unto itself.
Yeah, that's.
I think that's why we did the food or retail.
But apparel and things like that are pretty.
There are permits you need, but that is you want whatever. Or things like every restaurant that's open seems to do great.
I've
So-
been to a few workout studios down the shore that had really great retail in the front and then the studio space in the back. And so half their business actually was the retail, and then they had like 2 smaller studios in the back.
If I understand your spacing, you can only have one per block. I like not take over any.
Well, still, though, I mean, you walk by an office and it's noticeable. I think it's a little bit.
I think the feedback that it would be difficult to have a limitation about hours of operation because it would be hard for the borough to be able to track and ensure what's happening. Really kind of is the need to have some sort of then activation instead. If you can't, like, I think if you had a gym that was going to be open 12 hours a day and therefore people would be coming and going 12 hours a day, it would still feel more active because classes turn over every hour, and in general, even like a regular gym, people tend to turn over every hour 42. So that coming and going would still be happening, but if we can't require hours of operation, we could, but like it wouldn't be able to easily be moderated.
Why don't we just go, does anyone disagree with any of the principles articulated? I mean, I know Aaron expressed some concerns, but I think.
I don't disagree, I like the idea, my comment is kind of where I think Brian was heading, is like, how are we defining
Yeah.
food and beverage and retail? The new
Well,
dollar.
isn't the main idea that it's something else permitted besides the actives? Would be any of the other permitted uses on Haverford Avenue except this new one? Yeah, for the
That's a good way to put it.
for the first 12
You
or
get a
14
small
weeks or
restaurant.
whatever.
I think that's a good idea in general, just to permit, in order for businesses to be viable in this retail landscape, having multiple different things to use.
Yeah, but in this case, we're requiring it. They have to sell popcorn or something.
So another way to look at it is to say, which I think is one of the ways where we were heading is the first so many feet of Haverford Avenue still has to have the uses that we currently require. But
Right.
behind that, say after 10 feet, 20, whatever, you can actually have other uses which are currently restricted to the upper level.
Does anyone disagree with that approach? Anyone, does the dimensions seem okay to people, the dimensional standards?
think if we say a minimum,
Where did 12 feet come from for the 5 feet discussion?
It's related to how big a coffee shop has to be. Basically, like a restroom and a serving counter. It's, anyway, like how much you got.
Yeah, I was just curious.
So
if we,
it's like the bare minimum for certain kinds.
one of the more shallow buildings on Haverford is 46 feet.
The American Family Market building's 40 by 80. Actually, it's a little more than 80 if you count the storage. So, which is large enough to do a studio. So,
Yeah.
As one example, the
So the building that was the ice cream, it's 46 feet.
there's not very wide.
Village Streets. But that's not a separate building, that's just like a bay.
Wow. It's, yes, but that portion of the building.
Well, then, that doesn't get occupied by this use. There's other parts.
That portion is 46 by 31.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's a consensus and we can just advise council that, you know, there was a public request on this topic that it's been considered to the recommendation or the consensus is that we should specifically define these uses to clarify that they are allowed in the commercial areas. But that on Haverford Avenue, there would be a spacing requirement of 200 feet, 150 feet, what was it?
Well, currently it's 350 feet.
And I'd be okay with the smaller one personally, but
I think if you look at Adam's drawings, the next, a natural dimension is 250 feet, because that gets you one per block.
that is, I personally feel like flexibility is usually the right approach because you don't know which property you're dealing with, but I mean, whatever, I mean, 250 feet spacing and that you have to have another permitted use that's in other words, one of the already enumerated uses for the first 12 feet of the depth of the building from Haverford Avenue. That would be so there'd be a special set of rules for the Haverford Avenue blocks.
And then, is there a consensus about the width requirements? 40
It
feet?
seemed like there was a consensus to not allow. And when we say that the width, are you mostly thinking of the width along Haverford Avenue?
Yes. Not if there's a sidewalk.
Yeah.
Jump back on the 250 feet. That's if it's the same, but cycling and yoga.
Or yoga and martial arts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yin and yang.
Right, so you can still fill up. I mean, that's why 350 feet never bothered me.
Okay. Well,
But it's just the same specific use, because
Yeah.
I could see a cycling studio, and then I could see yoga, but that doesn't break the 250.
Not based on the way that it's phrased.
Which is why,
is the zoning officer, are Pilates and yoga different things or the same thing?
and remember, this is only on Haverford Avenue. You could go wild on all the other streets. And North, on the other streets, you go out. And if you have a Pilates studio, you can have it on the upstairs. It's only the ground floor. It's not like we're missing all these great opportunities, folks.
They're only upstairs. Okay, so
Yeah, I was.
That clarification.
40 feet seems like the consensus. There are some buildings that are a little bigger, like the liquor store is 65 feet, but or 80 feet, whatever it is. So and it seems like that we can forward more or less the recommendations that you all put together as our consensus-based approach for the topic.
Not to super hard on this, but the question just came up. If you had a larger building, a larger width, and you were putting the currently allowed uses on Haverford Avenue, for example, you had a deep enough building that you wanted another use, would a separate door with a walk down to that use be acceptable.
You mean like a flag, like even in a hall? Um,
Like if
I don't see why not.
somebody owned the building and it was large enough and they had a tenant who wanted 15 feet at the front on Haverford,
Right,
would we be okay with them carving out
and a whole separate, entirely separate. I'd be okay with
a
that.
commercial tenant in the back?
But I mean, just so I understand, Jennifer, you're talking about just subdividing a building with front to
would be-
back.
With
Is
for
there
the
any rule
commercial
against
space.
that? I mean, why would that be
You
allowed
could,
now?
you could do that
Because
now with
the use
uses that
isn't
are
allowed
permitted.
on-
Yeah, so I thought the whole question here was just to subdivide, saying you have to have the active use of the rear of the.
Right, it's
building.
just the examples we kept talking about, I wanna make sure that the definition then also would allow it, like, this would be, it wouldn't have to be the same commercial operator. So like, let's say a yoga studio wanted to open at the front, but
Right,
We
so
can
not-
fix that.
microbrewery manufacturing.
We can fix that.
Wanted to open in the back. would
All right,
be
so we
okay.
could, in other words, that if there's a consensus that an alternative is to subdivide the actual interior to create a storefront on the front, although we would hate to have that be vacant, that'd be almost worse than having the active use, so it would be worse. So like, we have this vestigial 12-foot storefront that doesn't get leased,
That's what I wanted to ask.
but it seems fine to me, it's the same idea, but it's actually a little bit weaker in terms of potential vacancy.
I guess I was thinking like, if, let's say you wanted to open a fitness center and you wanted the storefront, you have to include one of the approved uses for the first 12 feet of depth. But if you want to open a restaurant and you only want 15 feet, the owner of the building could divide and then do a currently not approved use in the back. So two different
They could do
things,
this
right?
use
Like-
or any other use,
Right.
basically,
Yeah.
it's already allowed,
Yeah.
in the back.
I think that the curious situation would be if someone says, well, I'll just lease that gym and I'll partition off the first 15 feet
That's why I wanted to ask.
and I won't lease it out.
That's why I wanted to ask.
I'll take the hit and it'll just be in the back.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, in a way, like, you can almost do that now. Is the thing. Like, an owner could say, like, yeah, I have, just, you can do it with permitted uses. Like, I have someone who wants to open up
Sure, I'm
a
gonna.
grocery store.
Is there anyone that doesn't think that that's a risk that we can't take, or otherwise we can include it?
Well, I think we can address it, actually. I don't know. But the thing is, that could happen now. Like,
Yeah, it's not terrible, it's not likely to happen now, but subdivision remains an option, nothing changes with this. So it seems moot, in other words.
yeah.
The,
It's just partitioning, not
again, the only other thing that I'm mostly concerned with is if the liquor store building doesn't comply with your rules, but it's, you can put anything else, like you said, in there besides.
I would support adding to this that these rules apply between Station Circle and North Narberth and Essex and North Narberth. And we've saved Station Circle out of it and put Station Circle in just the general 5A zone. So there's more flexibility for that building.
So this is only going to apply to the south side of Battleford?
No,
No, it applies to both sides, but only to the north of, or east of Station Circle.
Okay.
yeah,
Does anyone
Yeah,
disagree?
I would be fine with that.
Okay. Okay.
What does that mean?
Means I don't disagree.
Okay, so I think, any further discussion on this topic? I think we're,
I think we.
okay, so those are the recommendations we will forward to council based on the request from someone who's interested in starting a business or locating a business here. And potentially the landlords there too, so. That is the only thing we have on the agenda for tonight. So the fourth topic is public comment. Would any members of the public like to make comments? And if you would, then we'll go in order, and you just have to state your name and your address for the record, I guess. Anyone like to make any comments?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Is there anyone online that,
No one had their hand raised.
Oh,
I actually do that.
comment or a question. With all the vacancies currently on Hartford Avenue, and thinking about some of the kind of creative ideas that you're talking about for studio. Has there been any discussion of doing kind of a pop-up program to the small businesses, doing shorter term business to try their business out, maybe talking, like incentivizing to find their spaces at short-term rates to help kickstart some retail or other types of small business. About that, I have had a business with Street Bank. It's exactly that. There's multiple businesses. Pop up for a lot of things, and ushered in small businesses, some spaces, public administration for all that. The retail scene collapsed and the really just restaurants left. And that was really successful. So we're just kind of staying. But that might be another thing to consider as part of maybe exploring this idea as well.
It's something we can definitely pass along, and I'm also curious if the borough's been trying to work with any economic development assistance on
I
this.
know that there have been pop-ups, that there was like a summer high school kids ice cream.
Yeah, there's a meat store.
And there was a meat store. I think at the moment it's just been owner driven, but I'm not sure if the borough has done anything with the business. Economic.
So in our purview, we just sort of set the rules about what can go where. The council does, but we recommend it, right? So strategies like that, I think I heard you speaking, I was getting very excited. You know, I was thinking like, of course, Shift started that way. It started as 10 feet by 10 feet. You know, we had a Village Streets ice cream store that proved the concept. You have an ice cream store. You know, we had a guy who's a mail order meat and he tried in retail, you know, so like it really is up to the owner to try those things. And like I wish like a while back in my own professional life, I consulted in Manayunk, and I sure wish we had the kind of people there, you know, in Manayunk kind of promoting our Main Street. I don't know if they do. I mean, we do great events, but I'm not sure the retail stuff is there. But it'd be great if the business association or the owner wanted to take it up. I think your idea is great. And I don't think we have any rules that would prevent that.
I mean, the context, right, is that a lot of the vacant storefronts are owned by the same person, and they were sort of held vacant, I think, in part with the intention of redeveloping those buildings, which need a fair amount of, I guess, improvement, maintenance, but we don't expect that redevelopment to happen. And so I think the comparison to Manayunk is worth noting about like what our strategy is, who we want to be, how we're going to be that, because I know Manayunk's been through this many times too. Like, you know, they were sort of a furniture design center for a while, and you mentioned how the chain retail closed. But they do have kind of a thoroughfare on Main Street that is it connects to the bridge, and it is a traffic artery. And then of course they have the train station as well. And then they have the bike path. So they're sort of. So they're on the canal path. So they're very much this sort of destination, and they're on the way to other places. And Narberth is kind of this great pedestrian pocket around the train station, but we're not on the way anywhere. And then right now the bridge is closed as well, so that isn't the end of the world or anything, but it's just another constraint on access. So we can pursue. I think they are pursuing tenants for those spaces, and that's part of where this gym discussion is coming up. But we need to maximize essentially strategies that are gonna get people that patronize businesses to this area, as well as the brand of the area as a place that people wanna come, like, to get to, so. I know, I thought they had, the Youth Development Corporation as a way of advertising, gets the word out a little.
Yeah, they have a business improvement district that kind of advertises and focuses on this, so that would be kind of the role of the Main Street manager.
And then the pop-up discussion, I mean, services that help people like get connected with small business loans and things like that to get started, so. Anyway.
The pop-ups are a good idea and a practice that's happening on main streets all over. I mean, downtown Philadelphia right now, Market East, they have pop-up businesses that have gone in there. But that is funded by, government, their business improvement district, things of that nature.
Well, just a shout out to our community too, that's on our installations and storefronts that really makes a huge difference in terms of, keeping up the appearance of the storefronts while we wait for new businesses. So hopefully it's gonna improve in the future. Any other public comment?
Jeff Grant's,
Oh, thank you.
I was just curious about 230 Haverford. Is that something that does anyone have it updated? Is that actually going to get built? Or maybe I don't know if that's.
We can't speak for the owner, but the owner has told multiple parties, and I think including us, that they do not intend to pursue the project that they have a permit for,
They don't intend to pursue.
Not,
Nobody knows why.
it's not financially viable. It's too expensive to develop, and it will not produce enough income. Can't finance it, it won't work. Again, we can't speak for the owner, but that's our understanding. Any other comments or questions? We'll take a motion to adjourn then.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries and we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.
So